effort to support the center. And I'm looking forward to do more cooperation with the school, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. So with no further ado, go ahead and we are all listening to your lecture, inshallah.
Inshallah. So I think I'm going to talk around 20-25 minutes, so then we can have some time for questions.
Sure.
Okay. Did we start or we...
Yeah, go ahead, start. Go ahead, start, sir.
Okay. So we are online, right?
Yes, I think we are on.
Okay. Thanks for the invitation again. So in the last lecture, we talked about the emergence of theories of causality, the early Asharite and Mu'tazilite theologians, and why they why they felt like the question of causality is an important one, and how they described the relationship between God and cosmos based on this question, and how you understand causality. I said how you understand causality is very important for any religious tradition for several reasons, and one of them is for spiritual reasons, because how you describe God and cosmos relationship affects how you describe your relationship as an individual with God. A God like the first cause only at the end of a long chain of causality is a distant and aloof God. But spiritualities tend to see God at every moment, here and now, and thus they have theories of causality in accordance with that. Theories of causality which allows you to see God in every moment. And also they describe the world as being recreated at each moment, as we see in Asharite theological doctrines. So that was one of the reasons. Is that there's very it's a very relevant questions for religions to feel the presence of the divine. So that's one thing. The other thing is that that's also is also an important questions in terms of understanding other religious concepts such as miracles, such as karama, right? I mean, these issues, as many describe, these issues appears to be some breaks in causal chains in the cosmos. So when you see a miracle, or when you believe in a miracle, you also believe in, sometimes the cosmos acts differently. Sometimes breaks may happen. So that's another reason that make these questions important. Also, it is important for logic, for other reasons, because logic is in fact based on the premise that causal relationships are necessary. So, if you question causal necessity, the necessity between events, you're also then questioning the validity of logic. So that's another discussion, but another discussion for another day. I'm not going to go into that. It's also an important discussion for religion and science, and that's actually why I felt and I went into this venture, as I explained in the last lecture. The questions, the most questions when it comes to the relationship between religion and science boil down to how you understand the question of causality. So I believe understanding this, and understanding the religious positions on the questions of causality and freedom may help us to reapproach and to reevaluate the relationship between religion and science, perhaps find certain reconciliations, and perhaps this tension between the two is not that necessary. So that's things like that that make me study this topic. And I explained in the last lecture, Asharite and Mu'tazilite positions on this. And then what happens? In the book, I do not only look at theologians, Asharite, Mu'tazilite, and the later theologians, later Asharite theologians, such as Razi and Ghazali, but also look at philosophers such as Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, also Sufis, especially Sufi metaphysics, representative of Sufi metaphysics such as Ibn Arabi and his students Sadruddin Konevi and Dawood al-Qaisari and others. So, since I'm looking at Sufi tradition and in conjunction with the philosophical tradition, and also I look at the Ishraqiyun, the illuminationist tradition, and there are people like Mullah Sadra and Suhraverdi there. So I was only explaining the theological part of the discussion in the last lecture, theological part. By theological part, I mean the doctrines of Mu'tazilites and Asharites, and partly also Maturidite. So these are the Kalam doctrines, if you will, how Kalam tradition approached the question of causality and freedom. So that was what I did last week. So let's then focus on how more spiritual tendencies, more spiritual Sufism especially, approached the question of causality and how they understood causal efficacy of beings, and also how they understood the human freedom, human agency in this world. So if that is clear so far, so I can proceed then. So there is as I observe in my book, there is a similarity. There is this accordance between the philosophical evaluation of causality and freedom and spiritual, more Sufi-oriented evaluations of causality and freedom. There's one reason for that, and if I can simplify it, and I don't know how to simplify it, without say diluting it, but I can say only this: for Asharite, there is the discussion between the divine attributes and the divine essence. So this is an early discussion. There's the Asharite position thinks that the divine attributes and the divine essence are neither separated nor distinct from each other. Why they ask this question? Because it is because of the nature of the Quran. If you want to go a little bit earlier, so it's because of the nature of the Quran, and perhaps our audience, will know this discussion. The nature of the Quran, is it created or uncreated? That was the question. That was an early question, right? Is it created or uncreated? So this may sound like an old theological discussion, but it's actually important in how one understands, how one perceives the Quran, the revelation. Is it created or uncreated? So for Mu'tazilite, it is a created thing. The Quran, Kalam, right, is a created thing, because it cannot be uncreated, because that will multiply the eternals, the uncreated ones. So that would then imply shirk and association. So they don't accept that. So that's the Mu'tazilite position. For a more Hanbalite, I believe, oriented positions, it is like uncreated at all. So there's that problem. They say it is uncreated without saying how. Black cave, right? So that's one position there. Asharites wants to strike a balance, I guess, between the two, and they say it is neither created nor uncreated. It is created in a sense. It is created in a sense because the Quran was expressed in language. So language is created, the grammar is created, right? So there's something about the Quran which is created, but there's also something which is uncreated, in terms of its essence. That kalam is coming from God, the divine, the verbatim word of God. Hence, therefore, there's something in the Quran also that is uncreated. So the Quran, as if you can say, the meeting point between the created and uncreated. So that type of meeting point that we are seeing. So that was Asharite position, and that led to discussions on how the divine attributes related to God. So they end up saying the divine attributes also neither created nor uncreated. So they had to establish the relationship between God and cosmos through these attributes. And then they emphasize the divine will among these attributes. They kind of centralize the divine will. As I tried to explain in the last lecture, they centralize the attribute of the divine will. Hence, the world is a world of possibilities. There's nothing necessary in it. It is only the divine will which makes things possible, also which makes the continuity of things possible. And that they call this then divine habits. So, what am I guess, trying to say is this here. So any event that you see, so like I'm clapping my hand here, and you hear the sound, right? Any event. In this any event, this is what's happening. It is God who's creating the cause, right? It is God who's creating the effect. My hands, this clapping sound, your hearing of that sound, everything is created by God here. Everything. So both cause and effect are created by God, and they are attached to each other on a self-imposed habitual pattern, which we see in the world as consistencies, as, if you will, natural laws. So natural laws, in a way, are divine habits. And as I tried to explain, they come to this conclusion based on that and another assumption between the divine attributes and the divine essence. So I tried to explain that in the book in more detailed manner, but I think I should stop here. So that was the conclusion. The world is the world of divine will, and everything is entirely possible. There's no necessary connection here. The things are not necessarily connected to each other, which, by the way, appears to go against certain scientific presumptions, which think that science, this is how it functions. Science see necessary connections between causes and effects. At least there are consistencies in the world. That's how they see it, right? So there's that doctrine there. That was the Asharite occasionalism, as we also say it in the technical language. So, but then how then philosophy, Islamic philosophy, and Islamic spirituality think about this? Okay, that's the question now. How they think about this quite orthodox position on causality. That quite orthodox position again thinks cause and effect are created by God, and everything actually, even my intentions for some, even my thoughts, even my freedom is created by God. So does that leave any place for human agency? That's another question. Asharites wants to solve that problem on the basis of the concept of kasb. That means acquisition. God creates and we acquire things. But is that really solving the problem? That's another question. I'm not going to go into that. But for philosophy and Sufism, their starting point is a little bit different when it comes to how they establish the relationship between God and us, God and cosmos. Their central concept, as I understand, is existence or wujud. Wujud. We are mawjood, right? The things, there are create and there are existing beings, but I'm not talking about mawjood. I'm not talking about beings. I'm talking about being itself, being. That's the most universal concept, as if, we all know what being is, what existence is. There are individual existences that we see around, you, me, this computer here, this cup. These are like existences. We are participating in existence. We all exist. And I'm not talking about, these individual beings, you, me, this cup. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pure existence. We all exist. We are participating in existence. And that's the thing for them. That is the thing. It is what we see in Ibn Sina. That is also what we see in Ibn Rushd. That's also what we see in people like Ibn Arabi, and also people like Suhrawardi and Mullah Sadra. As if, aside from this Asharite orthodox doctrine on causality, occasionalism, we have also another current, another strong current, very popular or very very popular in philosophy and spirituality. That's another current. We have also another way of seeing everything. And because they do not start this time from the divine will, as Asharites do, but this time they start from existence, wujud. Why they do that? I mean, why is that? If you remember, or if you know, if you don't, it's an easy concept to understand, I guess. So I think one of the starting point of this way of seeing things is Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina's, how we say, like modalities. It is this: we all are contingent beings. We are possible beings. You, me, this cup. We are possible beings. We may be, or we may not be. We do not explain our own existence. I mean, I am not my own cause, if you will. I mean, we all depend on something else. Without the universe, say, we wouldn't exist. Or we will now, we exist now, we may not exist tomorrow. I mean, or we didn't exist 100 years ago, I guess, right? I mean, that's the type of thing. We are contingent being, as they say it in philosophy. We are possible beings, but there's a continuing existence too, right? Existence continues. We are possible beings. We come and go. We do not explain our existence. So hence, they say, there must be one thing, which should explain itself. Otherwise, existence wouldn't exist at all. So there must be one thing which should be its own cause. Okay? And there must be one thing which should have an existence because of its own self, its own definition. That existence should be part of its own definition. Hence, they describe that as necessary existence. Wajib al-wujud. Okay? Al-wajib al-wujud. That is the necessary one, and we are all possible ones. Okay? So if you think about this, now they established the relationship between God and the world on the basis of this possibility and necessity. There's one necessary being, and there are also possible beings. That's us. Okay? That's us. That's how you connect to, that's us, between necessary and the way they do this is on the basis of the concept of existence. Here we have wajib al-wujud, which has existence as part of its own definition. It is existence itself, if you will. The wajib al-wujud then becomes the existence itself. And there are also possible existences. They participate in this existence. They are given existence by wajib al-wujud. They're borrowing existence from it, if you will. They're being given existence by the one. Their possible existences, their possible beings are taking their existence from it, from the one. Okay, that's how they see it. Now, once you start understanding this concept, it is existence now that is your central concept. Everything else revolves around it. Everything else revolves around the concept of existence. and I cannot, really overemphasize the importance of this concept to understand what comes after that. It shapes everything. Then it shapes how they understand God and cosmos relationship. It shapes everything, from a hereafter to to spirituality, to theodicy, like the problem of evil and things like that. I mean, it kind of permeates into everything. This understanding of existence, that is existence. Now, it also shapes their understanding of causality, and that I specifically look at in the book. It also shapes their understanding of causality. How? Now, look, if existence, if the one, wajib al-wujud, if that is pure existence, and if we are taking our existence from it, that invites a participatory account of causality. We participate in existence to the extent possible, by our own humanity, if you will, or by our own limited being. We are limited. God is limitless. God is infinite. We are finite. But finite can participate in the infinite to the extent that is allowed by its finitude, if you will. So a flower, a tree, you and me, even this cup, we all participate in existence, but to the extent allowed by our own essence, if you will, by our own limited essence. We are not really being it, but we are still can participate in it, as if, like this, like shadow participate in light. It is not the absolute light, but it is still light. It has still light in it. Like we are like shadows, if you will. Then that this is probably why that language emerges in Sufi literature. Like we are shadows. They say things like that, right? The world is a shadow. Why they say that? Because shadow participate in light, but also, but to the extent that's allowed by, by its essence. Hence, it's not the absolute light, of course. The distinction remains between the world and God, but also it also participate in it. There's also something, some light in it too. So it is not the absolute light, as if you will, it's like eroded light, but eroded light is still light. It's still participating in it. So that invites is such a way of seeing things. We participate in existence. We also participate in the divine reality, if you will. Hence, now, why do I say all this? Because that's how they will understand causality. Aside from all other things, from prophetology to eschatology to, say, even politics and things like that. But that's another, I guess, topic for another book even. But specifically for causality and human freedom. Now, that's how they establish causal efficacy of beings, ourselves. Causal efficacy. We are causally efficacious. So if you remember, for Esharites, it is God who's creating cause, and it is God who's creating effect, right? So there's really nothing here for your causal efficacy as an agent, because as if God's causal efficacy is dominating everything and leaving no space for the created beings to have certain efficacy there. But if you start from the concept of wujud, the picture changes. Now you participate in the universal existence, in the all-encompassing existence. Hence, you are free and you are causally efficacious because of this participation. You're not really separated from it, right? So you're causally you're free because of the divine freedom, if you will. So if divine is free, right, and if you're participating in it, there's really no duality right now. So you're participating in the divine freedom as well. So that invites this type of conclusion. Okay. So and also you're causally efficacious because of your participating in the divine power. You're participating in the divine knowledge. Kind of that, that type of way of seeing things. So that allows you to see at once the divine presence, the overwhelming divine presence in all events. As I'm clapping my hand, I'm drinking this water, this coffee here. So when I'm drinking it, or when I am speaking, now it is really a strange thing that I am speaking right now. So if you think about it, right, all I do is to want to speak, right? So my thoughts are becoming verbalized, and they are having sounds, and I can transmit them to you. But all I do is to just want it, and I do not control everything that's happening in my brain. I do not control everything that's happening in my tongue muscles or my body, blood veins and everything that participates in this activity. That's right now, that's happening. There are like billions of things happening in my body when I am speaking, when we are speaking, and when you are listening. That billions of things that, they are beyond my reach. So as if, yes, divine presence, divine omnipotence, divine power, divine will, divine knowledge is present in this activity. Overwhelmingly, that's very close. You can feel and you can see it at all times, as if we are being recreated at all times when I'm speaking. So that allows you to see the divine presence at all moments, but also allows you to see your own individuality too. So as if, to use Rumi's, this famous poet, right? Rumi, Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi's analogy, as if you're like this drop dissolving in the ocean of unity, but without losing your own dropness. Can you? That is the now conclusion that this invites here. So that's one thing here. So the important thing is to see the overwhelming divine presence, divine power, divine will, divine knowledge at all events. Hence, you will have that sense of ihsan, right? Worshiping God as if you see God, right? That that type of ihsan, that type of closeness, that type of consciousness of presence of God. So you have that on the one hand, right? But on the other hand, you don't want to lose your individuality too, because the distinction remains between God and the world, and you also want to affirm yourself as a responsible being, as a being who has freedom and will be held accountable for his own deeds, as the Quran repeatedly says. Okay, because there's an emphasis in the Quran for human freedom, and there's an emphasis on justice. And the emphasis on justice invites that we are responsible for our deeds. But there's also an emphasis in the Quran in which nothing happens without God. There's that emphasis of divine will, divine power, right? And there's that emphasis too, as if the Quran brings the two together. The Quran brings the two together and invites us to see the divine presence, but also invites us to see us as responsible agents. So what I'm saying is that this more spiritual evaluation of this question of causality and human freedom, in conjunction with the philosophical tradition, appears to give us a framework, a metaphysical framework, in which you can affirm both. You can affirm both your own freedom, causal efficacy, but also you can affirm the overwhelming divine presence at all moments, at everything. And how they do this? By starting from the concept of existence and tracing its implications as agents participating in the divine causality, as participating in the divine freedom. So that's one thing I wanted to underline. Basically, I'm saying it's important to see both us and God at all moments, our responsibility, but also divine creation at all times, at all events. And that's what they're trying to achieve, I guess, here. And one other thing they add also, I think this is also related to question of predestination, qadar. So that's going to be the second thing I want to emphasize today. So it is this. So since they start from the concept of wujud, as I said, especially the spiritual tradition, they also come up with a concept of ma'lumat, or ayan, if you will, ayan as-sabita. So that's their another important, I believe, say axis or important contribution to the discussion here. So if you recall, I said for their teachings, wajib al-wujud is pure existence, right? So by starting from that, also they then continue. If God is pure existence, God is also pure knowing. In God, intellect and intellectus, what is intelligible? Aql, aql, maqul, and aqil. The knower, the known, and knowing. They're one and the same thing in God. So once you say that by starting from the concept of existence, you kind of connect the existence with consciousness, with knowing, with ilm, right? So if there is knowing, there's also known. There's also something known, they say. There's also something known. Why is this important? I'm going to explain. Because it is important to establish the human freedom. And this is how they do it. If there is knowing, there is knower, there is also known. And known is us. We are ma'lumat, if you will. Everything happening in this world, we are knowns by God. God is knowing everything, right? God's knowledge is infinite. God knows everything. We are knowns. And so according to this, God gives existence to what God knows. And those knowns are called ayan as-sabita. And why is this important? Now, God gives existence to what God knows. So we are known beings. So according to this, God is not really determining what God knows, but only gives existence to what God knows. So we are, in a way, uncaused causes of ourselves, according to this theory. According to this, not the only theory, I guess, but it's like a teaching, as if you will. So we are our own causes, if you will, to some extent at least. We are uncreated, if you will, too, as divine ma'lumat, as divine knowns. There's something very unique about our existence. And there's like that co-eternity, if you will, with God. Because of that, we are uncreated, as they say, غير مجعول, as in the Sufi literature. Therefore, we are uncaused causes of ourselves, at least in certain sense, So God is not the determiner here of our own essences, but it existentiates them. It gives existence what He knows. So based on this, then they will say there's this radical freedom in this world as well. There's that radical freedom. There's this radical divine presence, but also there's this freedom too. There's this freedom too. This is also interesting, I must note, that Sufi literature is usually seen as being quite a determinist one, as if this Jabriya, right? I mean, like submission to the will of God, and kind of escaping from responsibility. Sometimes that is the reading that is being offered. But the reality, as I see it, is quite different. Because the very fundamental doctrines that they're subscribing to are giving us a different picture. And that was also quite a discovery for me when I was preparing this book. I think I should stop here. I basically said, a couple of things. I think to reiterate, I also am aware that this topic may be challenging, for some of our audience. Let me just, briefly say that I said differently from the Asharite occasionalism, Asharite theory of causality, philosophy and tasawwuf, Sufism, in the Islamic history, they emphasize the concept of wujud, existence. And based on that, they arrive at different conclusions on the question of causality and freedom, in a way which wants to emphasize both overwhelming divine presence, like this ocean of unity we are participating, as well as individuality, as well as our own essences, our own individualities, our own responsibility, and our own freedom. And thank you. Let me stop here, and if there are any questions, we can continue. I can't hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for the lecture. It is on the side of philosophy and it needs more attention a little bit. I have two points to address. We need to define the meaning of Sufism for the regular people. If somebody want to ask about what is Sufism, we know Galal Rumi and all this kind of authors, but we need to just define it in a very easy, just a definition. How do
Sure, I can do that, I guess. Yeah. So there are Sufism. I believe the best definition is Islamic spirituality, right? I think that's the best definition. But if you want to have more like grounded knowledge of it, I guess we should go a little bit earlier. And I think looking at where the term Sufism come may help us here. For the word Sufism, there are several explanations. One of them is saying that the word is coming from the word Sophia. That's the Greek word, Sophia, right? Sophia means wisdom, like philosophia, the love of wisdom, right? So that's one explanation, but I believe that's the weak explanation because there's really no, right, it doesn't really make sense. There's another one which says that the term is coming from Saf, pure. Like people who are seeking for this tasawfi, if you will, this sincerity, this purity of heart, right?
Means Safi in Arabic. Safi.
Yeah, Safi, right?
Yes.
So that's Safi. So that's another explanation. The third one is Ashab al-Suffa. There was, as you might know, right? There were people living in the veranda of the first mosque of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, right? So they were living there, like people like Abu Huraira, right? They were part of that. So they kind of they detaching themselves from other things, but dedicating themselves to do, to piety, to knowledge, right? Acquiring knowledge from the Prophet. We're just living there, right? In a quite a simple and humble way, right? Without a proper dress and things like that. That was kind of a model. So some people think it is coming from that root. Sufa. The third root, the fourth explanation, I believe that is the most convincing one. The term is coming from suf, wool garment. Okay. Like the Prophet's garments, the clothes, right? The wearing, especially in the Middle East, that is known as the garment of humble saints and prophets, right? That's like the garments of them, like suf, wearing suf.
Suf.
Suf. And that is the wool. It may, but I mean, it's not the question. I think the question is not here what they are wearing. The question is that what they are not wearing. Because in the after the after the Prophet passed away, wasalam, right, and the Umayyi empire, and there was this increase in worldly, say, richness. So for some people, this increased worldliness was a betrayal of the prophetic model, because the Prophet didn't live like that, right? So they said, as a reaction to this increasing worldliness, some group of people, according to this narrative, right, some group of people, they detached themselves from that type of living and kind of dedicated themselves to piety, to living, to kind of to live in accordance with the prophetic model, which is like the Prophet lived in a quite ascetic mode. In fact, didn't eating little, praying a lot, right? Lived in a mud hut, right? That kind of if you think about the life of the Prophet, he was actually living quite a simple life, and then worshiping a lot, right? That type of so kind of they, I think, felt the need to ascribe and to imitate that, and to live that, to live in accordance with that, in the context of this increased worldliness. Another thing that I can just add very briefly for the general audience. So that was I think that's enough for the for the root for. In my view, it's coming from suf, the wool. That makes more sense than others. And the other thing is that when the Prophet died, right? We in the era of the tabi'in and tabi'in, we see the emergence of Islamic sciences such as theology, kalam, right? Also, like ilm al-hadith, right? And then also we see fiqh becoming jurisprudence, becoming a science, right? We see emergence of people, Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifi, and others, right? Ahmad ibn Hanbal, others. And then in theology, we see Ash'arites and Mu'tazilites emerging and discussing these things, right? That's that science, right? That's becoming a science. Kalam becoming a science. Fiqh, jurisprudence becoming a science, right? The law. People who are focusing on the law. People who are focusing on the theological part. That's becoming a science. That's becoming a science. Grammar, hadith, they're becoming a science too. But there is something. If these are becoming a science, these are becoming, sciences of Islam. There's something missing here in this whole spectrum, and it is this: religion cannot really be reduced to the legal, or cannot be reduced to only the theological. There's something about religion which is felt, which is tasted, which is more intimate relationship with God, or which is more, say, deeper look at your own heart, right? Your own psychology, if you will, your own inward domain, if you will.
Your own soul.
Your own soul. Yeah, that's very good. So that's another thing. The way of knowing God, if it's only reduced to the legal. So if you reduce religion only to the legal, then you have a list of do's and don'ts, and that's all, right? So that may be convincing for some people, but kind of it's a quite limited understanding of religion, if you will. Religion is not only do's and don'ts; it's more, right? When you can know everything about zakat, right? How to give to what person, to whom, right? But that doesn't really explain your state of soul when you are giving it, right? Or to what, how you feel, or your purity of your heart when you do it. Like that type of more intimate discussions you don't really find in the legal tradition. In theology, you can talk about God's attributes, and how to, prove the existence of God and things like that, right? But also, that doesn't give you that intimate relationship with the divine. It is like this. You can study this coffee for many years. You can know everything about it, right? You can analyze it, molecular atomic level. But if you're not tasting it, your knowledge is quite lacking. I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, we know a lot about religion. That's usually, like it may be the case. You may study religion as an object, kind of, you know a lot about it. You know what, you know the information about it. But when it comes to internalization of the information, when it comes to tasting it, right, that's a different field. And you don't really find it in theological discussions. And that's the type of knowing God. It's like, you know a lot about God, but knowing God is quite different from knowing about God. Kind of knowing religion is quite different knowing about religion. Kind of, you know it from a distance. But this time you participate and you kind of taste it, right? So as if, this Islamic spirituality, tasawwuf or Sufism, appears to be emerging because of this need. Because theology and the jurisprudence, although they are very important and they are necessary, in fact, but they do not seem to exhaust the totality of religion. There's something also needed, something else is there that's also needed. More participatory, more intimate, more, that's why, they will then start talking about God as we see, as in Rabiatul Adwiya, like, right, the God, the beloved, for example, right? The words like that will then come. So we won't see that in Asharite and Mu'tazilite discussions, right? I mean, you won't see that. But, they're writing poetry, poems, love poems, and, they're living a, life zuhd, like a detachment and things like that. So that's a more kind of experiential, more involved type of religiosity. And that's why we saw the emergence of this Sufism and the later developments. And as we will see, as I just tried to explain also, later metaphysical formulations, which can explain this participatory knowledge, this experiential knowledge. The philosophy will take a different turn too, but that's another, again, discussion. I think that's all that I can say right
now. My second question, Dr. Cook, I'm not sure if you want to address it now or address it to the next lecture. How is your human freedom affects your spirituality? We see oppression all over in some part of the world. We see freedom in some other part of the world. How the human freedom affect your spirituality to God?
Mm-hmm. If I'm understanding you correctly, so are you asking that how it affects that how I should act or how I should take or process what's happening out there? Is that what's your point is?
No, my point is somebody lives under oppression,
mm-hmm.
and somebody lives in a free country.
Yes.
What is the difference between the spirituality between both of them? Which one can be more spiritual? Which one can be more open to act more in a spiritual way than the other one?
Yeah, I think spirituality is possible in all contexts. It's like it's one of God's bounties, and that God shares independent of the context, kind of like air. I mean, it gives you air wherever you are, right? Things like that. So I think even if you live in an oppressed country, one should have opportunities to have this very close relationship with God, and that's what they aim to. But of course, I will also like this lean towards a freer environment. Freedom is I believe is creating better human beings. It allows more intimate and more say honest human beings. Kind of oppression. There is that relationship between oppression and hypocrisy. I guess that is. I think that's more easily is established. Yeah. But aside from that, I guess even in living in under very difficult circumstances, one's relationship with God it goes beyond this type of contingencies that is surrounding us, and that should surround, and that's surrounding us. I think there's always that possibility. Even if you are in a prison, I guess one can pray with that intimacy, I guess, and that we see a lot of examples of that in the Islamic history. But again, I mean, we should move towards freedom.
Freedom, for sure.
That's one of the reasons that made me write this book too. If you look at the title, it is Islam, Causality, and Freedom. And according to my reading, there's that great emphasis, and this theological emphasis at least, perhaps not political, but there is this theological, metaphysical affirmation and emphasis on human freedom. That's almost like overwhelmingly present in the Islamic intellectual tradition. Although we may not be able to say things for the Islamic political and social, context, but that's a different thing. And what I'm mostly interested in this book is the more intellectual discussions that are taking place around causality and freedom. But we also are lacking, I am aware that, a lot of, this political oppression, and we have a lot to cover there. I know that.
Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions, Dr. Cook. And we thank you so much for your time and your knowledge, and we appreciate your time. Dr. Özgür Koca is assistant professor at Bayan University, School of Religion, and for sure, inshallah, we'll see you and enjoy with you the time next week, Bismillah. Thank you so much, Dr. Koca.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye. Assalamu alaikum.